Hi, it's Diane Brennan. Welcome to Aging Dynamically, and thank you for joining me today. And today I want to talk about one of the huge debates in the carnivore community, and that is, are coffee and tea appropriate on a carnivore diet? And I've seen interviews with multiple big shots in the carnivore community, Dr. Ken Berry, Sean Baker, Elizabeth Bright, all of them. And they all have different answers. Some are very, very strongly against the coffee and tea. Others actually drink it. Some say depends on your tolerance. So it's really hard to get a definitive answer, but I found mine. So I was listening to videos by a young man from New Zealand named Max German. Now, he's a biology student, and that's what he follows. He follows the biology, and he's very clear on the biology and explains it very, very well. And so it comes down to this. You hear everybody say, oh, we're omnivores. No, we're not. No, we are not. They say that because of our teeth, because we don't have those long, fangy canines of like a wolf, a lion, a tiger. Well, there's a reason for that. We don't need them. We have an arm that does this and can throw spears and do a bow and arrow, slingshot, opposable thumbs, so we can grip tools. Lions and tigers don't. They have to chase down and bite into and hold on tight to their prey to bring them down and then rip them open to kill them, right? That's how they've got to get their food. And then they have to rip their food out of the dead or dying animal. We don't have to do that. But our biology matches them the rest of the way when you get into our gut. So when you go inside to the part that actually matters for processing food and breaking it down and absorbing the nutrients, we are carnivores. First, our stomach acid. So the more acidic your stomach, the further you are along the carnivore scale. And stomach acid pH goes from 1 to 7. Herbivores are up around a 6 or 7. Omnivores are at a 3 to 4. Carnivores are down between a 1 and 2. Human beings are at a 1.5. The only thing more acidic that's a solid 1 are things like vultures and stuff that eat dead animals and have to be able to neutralize that bacteria and process it. Okay, that's it. That's the only thing more acidic than us. We are omnivores. We are in the omnivore range. The other factor is the length of our colon versus the small intestine. So when you take the small intestine and the large intestine, in an herbivore, you see apes have those really big round stomachs, right? It's because they have a bigger colon to process the plants and a small intestine, because the plants don't process in the small intestine, they process in the large intestine. Ours is too short. Omnivores are right in between us and the herbivores. Okay, the omnivores actually have kind of a medium size colon and small intestine. Then you get to humans, and we have a very long small intestine and a very short colon. Why is that? Because we are meant to process meat. Meat processes in the small intestine more than it does in the colon. So we are biologically meant to process meat and meat only. we do not process the polyphenols and other phytochemicals and flavonoids and all of those things that you hear are healthy for you. That was all, that's all been throughout all of my studies for naturopathy and holistic health, has all talked about the benefits to our health from flavonoids and polyphenols, and it's all a pack of lies. Those are nothing but toxins that are out to kill us. Okay? Truly. And we can't process them. So those are the things that cause us gas, bloating, leaky gut, all of these problems. Because we're trying to process foods that we're not designed to process. Again, we were shaped by over 2.5 million years of existence before we started eating plants. Okay? We only started doing that somewhere around 10 to 12,000 years ago. We have not adapted. When we started doing that, we started getting disease. Our ancestors prior to that age, all the way up until the Paleolithic, and before we went into, I forget what it is now for the Lithic, but the age where we started to gather and stay put instead of following our food. Neolithic, I think that's it. Up until the Neolithic age, we were strictly carnivores. And that is the design that is still with us today. So, coffee and tea, well, they're plants. Again, flavonoids, polyphenols, all of those things that are in them. And I've looked, there isn't an herb out there that doesn't have those, okay? I was really resistant to giving up my herbal tea. Coffee, I had to give up. I lost my gallbladder, it's going on 23 years ago. And when I did, coffee was something that I lost. And I've struggled off and on. Like I actually, for a while, I was drinking it okay. Then I was back to not being okay with it. Stress can play an important factor, by the way, I've discovered. I was more tolerant of it when I was highly stressed. But your gallbladder is the control valve for the flow of bile from your liver. Coffee stimulates bile flow. So when your liver produces more bile and you get increased bile flow and you don't have a valve to stop that, then it runs through your intestinal system like an absolute river, and it causes some really severe problems, and I had to stop. And if you know, you know, and I'm not going to go and get more graphic on that, okay? But tea wasn't doing that. Wasn't having issues with tea that I knew about. But after watching some of Max's videos talking about this and deciding, okay, if I'm committing to the carnivore diet, I'm committing to the carnivore diet. Now, I had been struggling with the sugar cravings still, even though I was exercising willpower. But willpower isn't something we have in such abundance that you can really rely on it, okay? That's a battle. This should be a flow, right? So I said, you know what? I'm going to try eliminating the herbal teas. I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to see, do I feel any different without them? What do I notice? What I noticed is the food noise went away. I mean, I'm living in a house where I'm surrounded by sugar because I'm living here as a live-in caretaker for my mother, who has a bin of sugar beside her chair in the living room. There's a refrigerator full of sugary things, maple syrup, jellies, you name it, there's sugar there. There's cake, there's ice cream, there's a counter full of breads, muffins, pastries. There's nowhere in that part of the house that I can go and not be confronted with sugar. It's right there in my face. It's very hard to exercise willpower when you're surrounded by it like that. It was one thing, it was easier when I had my own place and I was in a controlled environment where I didn't have any sugar. It's always easier in a controlled environment. But when I gave up herbal tea, the food noise went away. It's there in my face all the time still, but I have no desire for it. I'm not fighting my cravings. I'm not battling anything anymore. I just really, I have no, there's no chatter coming from it anymore, tempting and enticing me. None. So that was interesting. Now, you say, okay, what about herbal medicine? We've had herbal medicine forever, right? And part of that is infusions and teas, tinctures, things like that, right? Well, okay, our ancestors, the early ancestors, first off, wouldn't have had alcohol like we do today to extract herbs into a tincture. So I don't think tinctures will go way back ancestrally to millions of years ago, all right, before the 12,000 year mark. Infusions, I'm sure, do, but they didn't drink them every day. For the most part, herbal medicine would have been something that was applied topically as some kind of poultice, or it would be inhaled. And when it was made into a tea or anything, again, it's a toxin, right? But look at homeopathic medicine. We use toxins in medicine. We use toxins in herbal medicine. In homeopathy, you have snake venom, belladonna, and things, right? And you have the belladonna and lobelia and other toxic herbs as part of herbal medicine, but in very small doses under very strict control by a trained, skilled herbalist. That's way different than me drinking a tea every day, right? So I do still believe in plant medicine when appropriately used as exactly that, medicine. Toxins can have a benefit, but it's limited use. It's not something you're supposed to take into your system and try to process every single day. So that, for me, is the definitive answer on if you're following carnivore and you're saying, I'm a carnivore, this is working for me, and you really want to be a true carnivore, coffee and tea aren't part of that. Whether it's green tea, black tea, herbal tea, oolong tea, I don't care. If it's a plant, it's not something that should be ingested every day in any form. What we really, really need is meat, fat, water, salt, and a source of potassium. I actually use no salt and salt on my food because I need the potassium. I'll talk about electrolytes in depth in another video because there's a lot to that. Again, a lot of false information out there, just like there is around the polyphenols and flavonoids. There's a lot of lies that we have been fed for a very long time. And a lot of that has been because of industries that are making money from you purchasing those things, right? Gotta look at that. In everything, when it comes to your health, follow the money. Herbal tea companies making a profit, right? Doctors making a profit over you being sick from eating vegetables. Follow the money. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. You have to do what works for you. That's something that I tell my clients all the time. And again, I will reiterate probably many times in my videos that this is a journey. I mean, I've been doing this for going on 2 decades, and I just gave up herbal tea. It doesn't all have to happen overnight. Make changes, sit with them. You know, the book Atomic Changes, it talks about making small changes, but that affect a larger thing. And the more you make a small change, and then that changes other things, then the easier it gets to make other changes. Like for me, giving up the tea, that got rid of the food noise, that made it easier to get rid of the sugar cravings. They went away. They went away. Wish I'd known this almost 20 years ago, right? Would have been an easier journey. We all have to find our path along the journey. But if you want to know really the final definitive answer about coffee and tea on a carnivore diet, the answer biologically is no. It doesn't belong in a carnivore diet. If you're doing keto, that's a whole different thing because keto still has other plants. So you're still ingesting plant toxins. Anyway, like I said, I hope you've enjoyed this. Wish you much love. Many blessings. See you in the next one. Peace out.